In arbitrage, you have a lot of advantages too for somebody that's just getting started, that has a little bit of cash in their pocket. They can pick up a property and a lease much quicker, get the deal done, stage it much quicker than trying to buy a property.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Immigrant Doctor podcast. I have a very special guest today. His name is George Salas. I'm going to let him introduce himself in a bit, but I just wanted to start off by kind of telling you a bit about how we got to know each other. So we're actually a part of another mastermind together, and I found this guy who was so much into short-term rentals. And we started talking about it, and then he started telling me that, initially he started with short-term rental arbitrage, which was a very cool concept. And I figured, let me get him on the show and, help him shed some light on this concept. I understand it at a high level, but obviously I do not understand the nuances of it. So I'm going to have George come on and introduce himself, and then we'll just dive into this fun conversation. Welcome, George. How are you?
What's up, Avishkar? Man, thanks for having me, brother. I love the energy, by the way, man. And just an honor to be here, man. So my name is George Salas, guys. Just excited to be here, man. I'm a real estate and short-term rental strategist. I've been doing short-term rentals for about 5 years. And I like to say that we like to create lifestyle assets and cash flow for investors, our own properties, and that's what we do, right? So appreciate the intro, brother.
Yeah, thanks. I love it that you say you're a short-term rental strategist, and I want to dive into the strategy part of it. Let's just start with what got you into real estate to begin with. I know everybody has a journey. What was your journey?
Sure, man. So I'll give you a quick recap of the early journey. Journey started when I was 6. Parents getting a divorce. I lived in Lima, Peru, and essentially my mom was leaving my dad, right? So we flew out to this small little town, 50,000 people, and I didn't know she was getting a divorce. She was like, hey, we're going to go, guys, me and my brother. She took us, and essentially we went and lived at my grandma's house, which was an adobe house, right? And during that journey, half of the house melted. So I grew up very, very poor. And what I mean melted is like there was a leak in one area, and we were so poor, guys, that we couldn't fix the leak, and it was from the Spanish tiles, right? So the entire front of that, from the half of the house melted, so we had to live in just one little room, this other little room. So let's just say we were pretty poor, okay? We grew up very, very humbly. So then I moved here to the U.S. when I was 15 years old, okay? So which is about 23 years ago. You guys can do the math there. And then essentially I started in the hospitality industry. So I started serving, waiting tables, and working for different restaurants and bars, right? And then I graduated to sort of creating my own marketing, promoting business, right? And then I was helping different businesses create their marketing, host events, produce events, and then bring in the people and just create that whole atmosphere, right? So I did that for 10 years, I have to say, service and hospitality, right? And at the end of the 10 years, or towards the 10, closer to the end of the 10 years, maybe about 8, I was very successful at doing this business. So I had saved a few $100,000, about $400 to be exact, about $350 to be exact, and I invested it into a project as a limited partner. Okay, and this project investment was a venue here in Houston, Texas, and I essentially have put up all the $350 plus an additional $60 out of my personal loans that I took out, right? So $410 in total. We ended up investing into this 1.3 beautiful, gorgeous venue that was an event venue, and then it turned into a nightclub at night, right? 2 years later, the venue completely shut down.
Oh, wow. Right? And I was going to say, this was probably a great thing, and then you got your money back and some, but I guess not.
I did not get any of my money back.
Oh, wow.
And I couldn't do anything about it, right? So that was the biggest downfall I've had. But at the same time, I look at it as a big college education, right? I wanted to be on top of my industry by being a partner in this venue, right? Because I went from having this company doing these events, marketing, and creating this whole really cool business model, and then I just wanted to own the event. That was the top of the business, right? For me, at least at that age, right? So I did, but I didn't do it the right way. I didn't do the proper due diligence with the partners. Like I didn't have the actual knowledge to be able to like really dig deeper into figure what I was getting into as I do now, right? So fast forward a couple of years after that, we shut down, they locked us out, we lost the entire thing, and I was like, I don't know what to do, Avishkar. I lost $400,000, right? And I am just out there. I had savings of 7 years, right? 7 years saving, lost everything. So I'm sitting in my apartment at the time. I have no idea what I'm going to do, right? So
Wow.
I'm just literally...
Yeah, I know. So I know we're going to talk about short-term rentals, but I just want to make sure that people understand that this is why vetting the person that you're investing with is so important, and understanding how the deal works is so important, which you clearly didn't understand at that point in time. You did not understand. But looking back, how did you kind of go back and learn what was missing there or what could have been done differently?
100%. From there, I made a move, right? So everybody comes out of a rock bottom through either a breakthrough or they go even lower, right? So I had to come out. I told myself I can't stay here. So I had to come out through a breakthrough. And then I had an external breakthrough. A friend called me one day and said, hey, George, you need to come to my flip, right? So I went to his flip. We stayed there for 3 hours, and it was more like an awakening, Avishkar. And then from there, the next day I said, I want to do this. So I went to study, real estate. That's when I started studying real estate. And this is like late 2017, right? So like 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago, something like that, right? So started studying real estate, and that's what made the change. I started taking courses. I started going to networking events, building the relationships, right? And just meeting these people that would eventually become partners and educate me and mentors, right? And it's all about building relationships nowadays, right? You already know that. So that transition led me into short-term rentals, okay? So, and then that's where I started learning. I hadn't learned all the structure that I know now, right? I was just learning short-term rentals, and I was an operator, a very heavy operator. I'm still an operator, but now obviously at a much higher level skill. But at the same time, was learning short-term rentals, and I started with the strategy that you mentioned, right? So I started doing arbitrage.
Let's dive into this. Let's dive into this. What is arbitrage? What is short-term rental arbitrage?
Short-term rental arbitrage is essentially when you rent a property and you sublease it so that you can make that arbitrage, that margin, right? Let's just say I used to rent, other than the flips that we had at the same time and the wholesale deals. I mean, we've done over 100 deals. About 35 to 40 of them have been arbitrage, right? So we started doing arbitrage, and in arbitrage essentially is when you're renting a property, right? And then you're subleasing it as a short-term or mid-term rental property. So I rent one for, most of our deals were about $1,000 at the time. We rent this apartments for $1,000, right? And then we would sublease them on Airbnb. And we had a bunch downtown. We were building a portfolio, right? And essentially we're subleasing, and the income coming in from these Airbnbs at the time was about $2,500 on average per door, right? So that was gross income, right? And then after you paid your rents, your cleaning and all this, each door would make about $1,000, right? $1,000 net. So it was pretty good, right? But when COVID hit, I had about 35 of these arbitrage in about 3 or 4 houses, okay? So in these houses I owned, I didn't arbitrage, right? So, and then, we got hit, right? So everybody got hit. So a lot of my properties were within a 2-mile radius, and then so we shut down a little bit. So the city shut down, that's what I meant. And then so we slowed down, business slowed down, and then I felt myself in need once again, right? And then that's when I figured out that I needed to make that switch of strategy. So now we've changed our strategy from doing small apartments to doing medium-sized properties. And we've got a few arbitrage, but now we just purchase, right? So, and then to go a little bit deeper into arbitrage, I have to break it down for you if you would like me to.
Yeah. I think I just want to start with the fact that what made you go with the arbitrage model rather than, directly going to the ownership model of short-term rentals. Why did you start with that?
Absolutely. So at the time of doing arbitrage, it was out of necessity. Okay. So out of necessity, because we didn't have enough cash flow, right? I didn't have enough reserve savings to be able to go and buy properties. Now, over time, we've bought a bunch, right? Right now, our portfolio has about 15 doors, and each one of them is performing very well, right? But at the time, we didn't have enough cash to go put. So for these arbitrage deals, it takes about $5,000. It took about $5,000 for us at the time. Now furniture has gone way up in price, right? And all these things, labor is much higher. So $5,000 a door, and then now you're cash flowing $800,000 a month out of $5,000. Phenomenal, right? Pretty good deal. So that's how we got started, and then it was all out of necessity, brother.
I wanted to highlight arbitrage because of the fact that the entry fee, so to say, is like, it's not that high. It's relatively low. And the reason why I say that, the reason why I wanted to do this was because a lot of, physicians, as they're getting out of residency, they may not have a lot of bandwidth. They may have a lot of student debt. And the same for other professions who are coming out of college or coming out of their university. They may not have enough capital, enough savings to kind of buy a bigger property. And so this arbitrage model creates a low barrier to entry. And I think it creates what I call now money instead of creating a legacy. But this now money eventually kind of you can pump into other assets like you're doing. You've transitioned now into owning these assets and creating that wealth for you and your family.
Absolutely. So originally, we were getting into these assets for very small money, right? $5,000. And if you do a house, for example, right? Let me give you a few examples of some houses that we currently have, and we still have an arbitrage, right? So as an arbitrage, the strategy. So there's one in Houston, Texas that we signed a 3-year lease at the beginning of 2021, right? And we put in $26,000 into this deal, right? And then a couple months later, we put another $8,000. $26,000 is, you got your first month deposit, you get your first month rent, and then you have furniture, about $20,000 worth of furniture, right? So that was the entry fee for this property. Now, we nailed it with this one. Not all of them are going to be this good, but we've averaged about $140,000 to $150,000 every single year since we got it. It's almost been 2 years, so about $140,000 to $150,000 per year. That's gross. That's gross.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
what's
gross.
your net being approximately after all the expenses?
Our yearly rent on that particular deal is $42,000, $3,500 a month, right? So you take that, and then our expenses are about 25%. Okay, so 25% of 140, right, is about $35,000. So 35 to 40,000 has been both years. So if you take the 140, 150 minus about 75, 80, we've all honestly netted. 1 year we netted the first 9 months, because we got this property in April, was like a $67,000 or $68,000 in the first 9 months. And then
wow! So the entry was $26,000, and you already netted way more than that. So it's more than covered for what your entry fee was.
Right. So the first year we did about 69 net. The second year, a little bit over 80. So if you think about it, you invested $33,000, right? And then you made almost 90,000. So we're talking about a 250 to 300% cash on cash return.
Wow!
Per year.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
So your ROI.
If it's that lucrative, man, why would an apartment owner, the owner of the asset, rent it out to you on a long-term lease and let you do the Airbnb rather than them doing it themselves?
Well, in this case, that was a house. For apartments, it's definitely not as lucrative, and there's so many of them, right? In an apartment building, that was the original model that we did. Average car, we used to go rent 5, 6, 8 apartments in one building, in one floor. We would just, boom, rent them out, right? And that was okay, but this business is not a passive business, so it would work for a doctor that's just getting started, right, out of the school, right, doctor school. It would get him additional cash flow. It's easy to get in. It would get him some pretty decent cash flow, right? And then you don't have the end benefits, but it creates cash flow. It's easy to make to actually 2 to 3 times your rents if you know what you're doing, right? Like some of our properties do 3-4 times our rents, right? And then the same thing with the mortgage, 3-4 times our mortgages per month.
And how involved do you need to be in this? Because you just mentioned that it's not passive, but I think a lot of people who are, W2 owners, especially, the hours are so challenging for them to manage. Can it be passive?
Absolutely. So it just depends how involved you want to be, right? So you can hire a co-host or a property management company, right? If you want to hire a co-host, you're lightly involved, right? If you want to be completely passive, then you hire a management company that will charge you 15 to 20%. That's always going to cut into a lot of your net margins, right? So, and if you want to be active, which most of the people probably listening are not going to want to be active, there is a way to make money if you hire a co-host, which is like in the middle of between hiring a property management company and doing it yourself, right? So that's what a co-host does, and they do a lot of these tasks, so you just oversee certain things, right? So that's like the sweet spot for somebody that doesn't really want to be completely involved, but also can't afford to be fully passive because they don't want to pay these larger sum to the property management company, right?
Right. Interesting. And you
Thanks,
know, obviously you moved to this acquisition phase now where you're acquiring these properties for short-term rentals, and you will own those properties. But just so that people understand, what are the disadvantages of this arbitrage model? I know we've talked about the advantages, not some of the advantages of owning the assets not coming to you if you're just doing an arbitrage. But what are the disadvantages that if we can just talk about those?
Absolutely. So I would say that few biggest disadvantages, Avishkar, are number one, that whenever you get a 2 to 3 year lease, right, that's it. It's over. And at the end of the 2 to 3 years, you want to renew, your rent's going to go up. So the numbers might not work because sometimes these landlords, they're going to want to raise the rent for obvious reasons, right? Taxes go up and then maybe it doesn't work, right? So you have the risk of having very short cash flow, right? And you're going to make your money back within those 2 to 3 years. It's very low chances that you don't, but then it's short cash flow, right? 2 to 3 years is really not enough. That's number one. Number two is that you cannot actually go and convert this house to your liking and create the unique selling proposition that a very good operator needs to create in order to create enough success and in the best numbers possible to maximize that asset. And what I mean by that is, if you rent this property instead of owning it, you cannot go and paint the walls. You got to get permission. You cannot go build anything that you want to. If you wanted to build, like you wanted to put a pergola outside and attach it to the ground, put concrete, you're going to lose all that, right? Because you don't own the asset. If you want to put a palapa on top of your hot tub, you're going to lose that, right? So you don't have the ability to change the asset to your liking, which when you own, you do that. You could do that. And if initially you add some of these perks and additional amenities to these properties, then your ability to be successful long-term with owning a short-term rental or doing the short-term rental business model long-term, it becomes easier than when you do an arbitrage. Those are some of the disadvantages, right? So, but in arbitrage, you have a lot of advantages too for somebody that's just getting started, that has a little bit of cash in their pocket. They can pick up a property and a lease much quicker, get the deal done, stage it much quicker than trying to buy a property and, putting down 20% or whatever it is, right? So yeah, those are little pros and cons, brother.
Yeah, I think the important thing to understand is that, short-term rental market is a hospitality market. It's not necessarily a need, it's a want. And from at least when you use it for leisure, again, corporate housing is completely different when you're getting, corporate executives or whatever who are traveling, coming in and staying in these assets. But when it becomes like a lifestyle asset, which you were focused on, a lot of these amenities that can be added, they actually add to the amount that you can charge for them. And that's actually a part of the strategy of buying short-term rentals, is what all you can do to kind of get a higher rent from them, or higher average daily rate. And so I understand that when you say that, these are some of the limitations, because that really limits the amount you can charge. Not to say it's a bad thing, but it's just that you have to strategize accordingly and see where you're going to be in the market based on the limitations that you have on that. And I think one thing that I want to mention also is the fact that you do not get the tax advantages that you would get if you own the asset outright, which is, you're just renting it. And so the tax breaks that you get for running real estate as a business, you probably won't get it if you're doing just arbitrage.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to touch up on what you just said. Okay, brother? So 100%, when you own this asset, our strategy is right now, we buy everything. We don't even want any more arbitrage. And we go and turn these properties, right? We buy them with the amenities for that market already built in. Let's give you an example, right? So here in Houston, Texas, we're going to buy pool properties with either a pool or a pool and a hot tub. We're going to have that. We're going to go and add, for example, a pergola, lots of furniture outside, cabanas if we need to. We're going to create value, and then even like building out certain amenities around that just to stay there. Like you can't move a freaking cabana that you build out, right? So it stays there. So we add the value, and that allows us to charge more.
So how can people get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So right now, to connect with us, my personal website is georgesalas360.com. And that's where you guys can check out like my STRs, my Airbnbs, connect with me, like, hey, Alex, we have got a bunch of videos and presentations in there. And then my investing website is empresscapitalgroup.com. And that's where we're going to be releasing our fund. So, yeah. Okay.
Very cool. Absolutely. Very cool. This is amazing, man. This was a fun conversation.
I love it, man.
Folks, some of my guests may actually have, some mentorship programs. They may have some deals that they're working on, and you might get interested in working with them. But please bear in mind that I haven't done any due diligence on what they are offering. And you should do your own due diligence before you start working with them. Having said that, these are very high quality guests that I'm trying to bring on so that they can provide good value to you. And, they're hardworking individuals and they have integrity when they work, but you should definitely do your own due diligence. I haven't done that due diligence on, what their programs are, what their deals are. So please do your due diligence. I don't want to be held liable for anything that they are offering and you join that program or that deal with them because you heard it on my podcast.